Welcome back to another episode of Keep Austin Safe, the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of the Austin Police Department. I'm your host, Jose Mendez, and today we're sitting down and talking with the woman that runs the show here at the Austin Police Department. Chief Lisa Davis is in the house. Chief, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Now, back in July of 2025, we had Chief Davis on the podcast, and she laid out her 100-day plan, and that was about 10 months ago.
Right.
So she's no stranger to the show. But she's back here today. She's ready to talk about the never controversial and the never debated topic of use of force.
Use of force.
But
yes.
before we get into that, Chief, this might be a loaded question, but how's everything going here at APD and how are you feeling?
I'm feeling fine. I coming up on my 2 years here in September, early September, and the time has gone by really quick. And then I look at what we've accomplished. I'm certainly looking at, met with Barry Dunn yesterday, and everyone knows we're doing some work with that firm and some recommendations. But to truly have it laid out and to look at all of those things we've done, it's impressive. So it's been a very I don't know what the word is to say, but the 2 years have gone by very quick. It's been a lot, but here we are, and I think we're better for it.
Yeah. Well, we know you're a very busy chief here in Austin, so we do appreciate the time coming in and being on the podcast again.
Absolutely.
So we're going to dive right into the topic of use of force. Now, it's a very controversial topic at times. It's a very debated topic at times. And I will preface this by saying that every department has their own policies with use of force, what that looks like, how it's reported, and things like that.
Sure.
So, but this podcast is specifically going to be obviously about APD and our policies and the changes that have come about. So we're happy to have you and happy to discuss some of this important information.
Okay, great.
Now, keeping it real simple here, what are some things that just come to mind when you hear the term use of force?
Well, I think for most people, when I think of use of force, it's someone getting hurt, or there's obviously, for me, for the chief, when I hear use of force and the different levels, and I know we'll go over that, but it's what was captured. And unfortunately, we live in an area, a time when everything's video or through body-worn cameras or phones. And there are many times when the story is not being accurately portrayed. And so we'll see someone post a video of one one version or one angle. And when you do the investigation, you look further, you actually see another story. And it's about understanding that even when it's looking at the body-worn camera of an officer, you are only seeing that one view wherever the officer is turned. And so we're not getting an entire 360 picture of what's occurring. And we're not getting what the officer's really seeing. And I think those are important for people to remember. And it's certainly important for executive staff and people that are looking at these uses of force to remember.
Yeah. Let's talk numbers for a moment. We're looking at statistics now. Looking at the 2025 use of force report that was published, APD reported 2,809 use of force incidents in 2025. 2,809. Now, that was a 1% decrease from 2024, but 9% above the 3-year average from 2022 to 2024. So not that bad. Now, 94% of subjects experienced a level 3 or a level 4 use of force, which is, the lower level uses of force that we have here. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And those often include, weaponless tactics, takedowns, pressure point controls, and hands-on techniques pretty much.
Right.
Now, and that number again is 94%. So about 6% of those uses of force came from a level 2 or level 1, which is your more severe,
Right.
more serious uses of force. So up until the recent change in the use of force policy, there were 4 total uses of force. And again, we had a change come in at the beginning of this year, but before that change, there were 4 levels. Can you talk about those levels and just give us an example of kind of what level each of those uses of force applies to?
Yeah. So the old level 4, and again, what we no longer have, and the majority of our uses of force were those level 4s. And so you think about attempting to handcuff someone and they tense up, or if I have to do a takedown, I'm pushing your shoulder down and you're down to the ground to handcuff you and you're resisting a little bit. Those type of things were counted as a use of force, and they're just not. And so removing that, again, they're reportable, and so officers are still reporting those. And there's a process that we've put in place to capture those, but they're not reported as a use of force. Level 3 is your tasings. Your again, maybe takedowns with an injury, something like that. And then it just escalates from there, with the most severe being, you're talking about a level 1. You probably have there's some serious issues going on with that arrest. So it's just the severity of it. But these are important concepts, and there's certainly the training behind all of these are critical for the department. But one was just recognizing the majority of these touch points, or these uses of force, were those level 4s that are not uses of force.
And so now the force have been kind of they're gone now.
They're gone. They're not. They're still being captured, though. It's
Mm.
it's important to know when we pull our gun on someone. It's important to know if someone resisted. We have to capture that data, and it is important to have, but it is certainly not use of force.
Great. So the next question I have, what areas in Austin are seeing the most use of force
I think
reports?
yeah, I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody. Certainly, downtown, our DTEC, and this is a group that you're talking about the congestion of Sixth Street, the nightlife area there, and downtown. So you're dealing with a lot of people. You're dealing with a lot of intoxicated people, and so you think about people unable to resolve conflict, and so being that close, that densely populated group, that's where the majority of our uses of force occur.
Yeah, and so that the use of force report that was published, it did identify some of the contributing factors that lead to those uses of force. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, so it's that alcohol, certainly. Deconfliction, people unable to deconflict, or beefs, so-called beefs that they have. Um, imagine getting thrown out of the bar and you're having a fight, and so now it's on the street, and now that's something we're dealing with. And so those factors are alive and well. And so when you think about where those factors are, it's downtown, and you
Yeah,
can probably look at the days of the week and the times that our uses of force are most, and they will coincide with that.
yeah, and I mean you have a much younger crowd
Oh,
down
that's
there.
true. That's right.
The summers come in, the weather. I
Yep,
mean, those all play contributing
they
factors.
do. Yes, they do.
When you look at that. Now, one of the things that stood out most on that use of force report were the racial and ethnic disparities. Oftentimes, there's an assumption that use of force is being more geared towards Hispanics and blacks than white people. Was there any evidence of that in this report?
No, I'm very proud to say that the Austin Police Department, there were no racial or ethnic disparities in our reports. And so certainly, I mean, talking to Dr. Robin Engel, it's probably some of the lowest levels she's seen across the country. So very proud of that. And I think, I think it's important too to talk about that people can see this report. This report is, you can find that online, certainly through the city's website. And I think it's important for community members to be up to date on what's occurring within the department. And those numbers are a good indicator of the work that we're doing here. I also want to go back to one of the questions you talked about, is the number of uses of force and the way that we were calculating them. Before the changes, the way we were looking at uses of force were, say I have a subject that we're attempting to arrest, and there's 4 officers. And one officer has to tase the person, another does a takedown, another uses their mace. So here we are. Everybody's using some type of use of force. We were counting each of those things as a separate use of force on this person, instead of looking at it as an incident, or this is one use of force and this is what happened within that use of force. We were counting those as separate uses of force every single time. And so you talk about not only adding those level 4s, and that really, putting that number pretty high, counting and calculating those uses of force that way were just inaccurate.
Yeah.
It did not paint a picture of what truly is going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear. I mean, it's safe to say that we were over-reporting uses of force.
Absolutely over-reporting. That's right.
And if you look at that, again, the number over, 2,800 uses of force, I mean, that could have been drastically lower had we been reporting them the way
That's right.
we're set to be reporting them now.
That's correct.
Now, let's talk about the changes to the use of force policy. Again, we had some changes come in at the beginning of this year. One was obviously taking away the level 4, but there were a few more. Why did you see a need to change the use of force policy?
Well, I think when I first got here, one of the things I heard again was just listening and learning what a level 4 was, and just like that is not a use of force. That's not the appropriate use for what that is, and it was certainly putting officers in a to look at these officers and to see. Um, Hundreds of uses of force being done, and I'm coming here trying to paint a picture of really what is going on here, and then understanding, wow, this is what we're reporting as a use of force. This is not within best practice. It's not the way it's done across the country. This is really not painting a picture of what we're doing here in the city of Austin. And it's not fair to the officers that are wrapped up in these things and in these cases. So removing that, again, still having it reportable. We still have the data available to come check that out. But then to kind of look at where is the training? Where are we training within this use of force? And my goal is always about keeping officers safe, reducing their injuries, and certainly, and what comes with that is reducing the injuries to community as well.
Yeah. Now, what were some of those changes in the use of force policy that were changed? Again, we'll hit on the level 4 is gone. Now it's a reportable incident. Again, it's still being reported to a supervisor. However, it's not necessarily being reported as a use of force.
That's
So it's
correct.
not adding to that.
Yeah.
that
I think the
engagement.
biggest thing was just the training and getting that training component in there as well. We've been an agency that has practiced ICAT, the Integrated Communication and Tactics. This is a Police Executive Research Forum. The PERF developed this, and this was really about how are we de-escalating situations? How can we do that with someone um, that has not have a gun? There's
Yeah.
you have a totally different scenario when you're dealing with someone that has a gun. But if we're talking a knife, a bat, empty hands, those type of things, if there's an opportunity for us to back up, to communicate with the person, and to develop tactics that we can use to successfully take that person into custody, where we're looking at the sanctity of human life, where you're getting out of this alive and I'm getting out of this alive.
Yeah.
I'm going to get out of here unharmed and you're going to get out of here unharmed. And when you could change that narrative like that, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Um, that changes everything. And I think through that training that we're going to be doing yearly, through in-service training, supervisors really touching on that, that frontline supervision. I've talked about how incredibly important those corporals and those sergeants are to those officers in the field
Yeah.
and patrol. And to have them really start talking about what ICAT is and what de-escalation is and what it means, looking at that training, and again, just pushing it from the top and pushing it from that supervisor level, we're going to see a lot of change from that.
Yeah. Now, can you walk us through the investigation process of a use of force incident? Let's say somebody's tased on 6th Street. What does that investigation process look like?
So those cases would be, again, you've got the frontline supervisor that's responding to the scene, talking to the officer, looking at body worn camera, talking to witnesses, gathering that information, and then it's sent to the force review unit, who would then take that and make a determination on it.
Yeah, and I'm sure they have recommendations that they propose
Absolutely.
once they do look at that. Now let's talk about a reportable incident. What's that investigation process look like?
Yeah, so a reportable incident is simply them letting the supervisor know that this occurred, and the supervisor writing that down. Again, it's documented, it's saved, and it's something we can refer back to, but that is the end of it at that point.
Okay. Now, being a few months into the new policy, probably about 5 months now, have you noticed any differences or any issues, or is it still too early to kind of notice?
That's an interesting question. I think at this point it is about, and the time has come to kind of take a look at where we are statistically. What are we seeing? And so I think we're going to take a look at that in the next couple of weeks and give me a rundown and a briefing on where we are with it. But it's important to be transparent with those numbers as
Yep.
well. So that is certainly something we'll get out to the community as well.
Good, and I'm sure those numbers are already drastically down based on
I
eliminating that
I believe so.
before.
Yes.
Now let's look at the way we report uses of force. Looking at reporting, one concern that officers had that we were over-reporting uses of force, like we had mentioned. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, coming here and looking at those level fours, there's no doubt we were. And to hire someone, like Dr. Robin Engel to come in, who she is an expert in this field, and to be able to take a look at our data and see, one, again, over one incident with different uses of force does not make multiple uses of force.
Yeah.
And so to change that narrative alone was a big deal.
Now, is data being reported differently now under this new policy, or is it kind of the same? You're just gathering the data and then kind of public.
No, the data, absolutely. The data, you don't mess with data.
Yeah.
You gotta go with what the data is telling you,
Mhm.
and the data will lead you certainly where you're having issues, where you're having problems, where we need to improve. You know, if there's something showing that we're trying to teach or we're trying to incorporate and we're not getting it, then we need to go back and see what are we doing here that's not working. How can we fix this? So the data is the same as far as calculating the data. But
Yeah.
again, I think when we go back and we look at this in the next couple of weeks, it's been several months now. We started this in January to see where we are and statistically from this time last year with our use of force.
Yeah. I mean, I know data's a huge thing with you,
Yep,
especially with the evidence-based policing and things that you're big on. You know, typically data doesn't lie. So,
that's right.
so from my understanding, there were errors with the way uses of force were being reported. Can you talk about some of those errors? And I think you hit on it already with, one subject, four officers, each has a use of force on that one individual that's being reported for uses of force.
That's right.
Did you see any other errors?
I think when I'm looking again at looking at just at that error, looking at the way the force review unit was looking at it versus they're making a determination and it's coming back to the supervisors at the sectors. What is that determination? Sometimes those are a little off. So having a conversation, fixing it. What is the final authority when it comes to who's making a decision on what this use of force is? And so to me, it's about where can we add when we're seeing issues, again, we're talking about mistakes of the heart and of the head, right? And we're talking about someone that may just need that extra training in the policy itself, or whether it's defensive tactics, those type of things. But I do feel very confident in the training, the ICAT training that we're building at the academy. Everyone's been through that at this point.
Mhm.
And then hitting on that every single year when you go into in-service training on what that is. What does ICAT mean? Not only once a year at in-service training, but again, getting those frontline supervisors talking about what is ICAT, what is de-escalation, and that's how we move in every situation we have. And again, people with guns, that's different. But when you're dealing with other things where we can take our time and we can isolate someone and talk people, use our mouths
Yeah.
and to de-escalate situations, we're going to see fewer officer injuries.
Yeah. And I know we've hit on ICAT training, which brings us to the next portion, which is just looking at the different training aspects with this new policy. So when we talk about integrating use of force policy into APD training, what does that look like, and how does that happen?
Yeah, I think it's in everything that we do. It's starting with that policy. It's talking about de-escalation and everything that we do. How can we, in every interaction through de-escalation, and sometimes it's not about use of force. It's about just de-escalating a situation we arrive on, and people are having conflict. How do we de-escalate those situations? So that's a tactic that we've all had. If you're a police officer and you've been a police officer for any, my gosh, a number of days, a handful of days, you're starting to learn de-escalation tactics. I mean, that's just the reality. And
Yeah.
there's nothing like being in the field and actually dealing with whether it's a family trouble or whatever it is you're coming up on. But that de-escalation, how incredibly important that is. But it has to be in everything that we do, in every piece of our training, and wherever we can put those policies to match, where we're just ensuring that we're being clear about what our mission and what our vision is when it comes to de-escalation. It comes again to you getting out of a situation, me getting out of a situation.
Yeah, and great. I think that's big for our community members to know that also. Now, this new policy rolled out rather quickly, like I said at the beginning of the year. But when it's all said and done, and everyone's trained up on this new policy, what is your one hope that this new policy will bring?
And not just the number or the decrease in the number of uses of force, but it's going to show how many officers we had injured, how many community members were injured. That is what's important to me. I want to see. I don't want any officer that's dealing with workers' comp or that's injured in the line of duty. That I take very seriously, and that is my job as chief to kind of look at ways we can minimize that. And I think this does that. And to look back again, I was to push this in January, and I wanted it to start in January because I wanted to be able to go back and look at the data,
Mhm.
a clean year-to-year type of comparison. But I think as we're looking at those things, to me, the biggest indicator of success is going to be, did we minimize and decrease officer injury?
Yeah. Now, moving forward, what are some of the next steps moving forward? I know there's been a lot of changes so far, a lot of good changes here at the department, but moving forward, what do those next steps look like?
I think it's just continuing this. It's continuing that training, ensuring that this is continued in service training next year, and that frontline supervisors are talking about it, and that we're continuing in this sphere of always continuous improvement. How do we continue to improve the way that we police, the way that we interact with our community members, all of those things, and the way we problem solve together, and certainly looking at the evidence based issues. Again, problem solving is a big deal, and we will solve community problems and community concerns together with them. And this whole use of force policy and these changes, again, I think will bring us closer to the community in the way that we're transparent about these numbers and the way, again, that we're having fewer people injured and fewer officers injured.
Great. Now, with this new policy, what is the one thing you want your officers to know and understand?
I want them to know that, listen, I took you seriously when we looked at level fours and wanting to get rid of those. We've done that. Again, they're reportable. We're able to look at them, but they're not counting as a use of force. And that your safety is paramount to me, and your interactions with the community when you're dealing with someone that is in crisis, and we have a lot of mental health calls here. We know that. So when you're dealing with someone, and you can take a moment to just sit back and you have the time to de-escalate things. That's what I want you to do, but always keeping your safety number one. And I want officers to know that is what I lose sleep at night, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
On the flip side of that, what is the one thing you want our community members to know and understand?
I would want the community members to know, again, read that report. I think it's imperative for you to know that the Austin Police Department is not dealing in racial disparities or ethnic disparities. And I think that is says a lot about this police department, quite frankly. And to think about the good work that these officers are doing every single day. It is one thing to see and hear on the news the things that we're doing, but man, there is a whole lot more. And there's a lot of work. Whether it's in child exploitation, whether it's in human trafficking, whether it's in narcotics, all of that good, important work that you're not seeing, you're not hearing about, that's getting done behind the scenes. And also that we're in a state of always continuous improvement, and that when we can be better and there's better options for us, better tools, better equipment, I'm going to fight for that every single time. And I would love for the community to be alongside me fighting for that.
Great. Now, it's coming up on 2 years. And so as we wrap things up here, I don't believe I asked you the last time you were on the show. But what has been the hardest part about your job 2 years in?
I think it's making those decisions that are, coming here and certainly recognizing that we were in not just a staffing crisis, but, patrol being severely understaffed, and understanding that I had to make some tough calls about, people in positions that they loved and that they were very good at. And that they worked very hard to get and to keep. And so to make those tough calls, that's hard to do. I didn't take it, as an easy thing to do at all. I wish I'd handled some of the things better, like going out and talking to people more one-on-one. I regret that, and I think I would have handled that a little differently. But I think it's really making those tough calls, and then they're yours. They're yours to own. And you and I talked when things are going great, it's great, but then the next day, here we go, and it's a roller coaster ride. It is, the work is so important to do, and when you can, again, keep in mind what your goal is, and again, that's to keep these officers safe, is to get them the equipment that they need, and we're gonna get that. We're gonna get to, I know technology is a big point here, but we've got this Trust Act is done, and so now we have some guidelines we can work within, and now we can start talking about what technology we can bring here to the city and for these officers to use. And so I think that's the biggest thing, and just taking a look at the recruiting and how challenging that is, and not just here, but across the
Yeah.
country. But I think as we're moving forward and we have some great ideas and the work that's being done behind that, I feel very confident about that.
Great. Well, big thanks to Chief Davis for joining us today. We want to thank you and your team for all the hard work that you do for the department and our city. And we look forward to the changes that will keep APD moving in the right direction. So we want to thank you for your time. I know you're super busy, and it means a lot to us to come back on the show and provide us with
Well,
this
thanks for having me.
information.
Anytime. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Appreciate it.
Now, for our listeners, thank you for joining us today. For more information about community events with the Austin Police Department, safety tips, news releases, follow us on our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and X as the Austin Police Department. We hope this conversation provides you with the resources that help everyone keep Austin safe.